Good afternoon, everyone. Today is Tuesday, March 8th. Welcome to the House Economic Matters Committee. Just a reminder for everyone to testify, your camera has to be on and the chat is for the members only. Today we have 5 bills with a total of 14 oral witnesses. The first bill of the day is House Bill 1265, Delegate Young. And I do not see Delegate Young, so we will go to the second bill, which is House Bill 1272, which is Delegate Howard, who I do see.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues. For the record, Delegate Seth Howard here to present House Bill 1272, Employment Wages Deduction Prohibition. This bill, pull up the fiscal note. This bill prohibits an employer from deducting a health coverage surcharge from the wages of an employee who has not undergone an elective medical procedure unless the employee expressly authorizes the deduction in writing. If you move further down the fiscal and policy note under the fiscal summary, you see the state effect that says the bill does not apply to the state as an employer. So I'm fixing that now. When the bill came in and I sent it over to the drafter, it went to the labor and employment article, not the state employment article. So I'm going to amend the state into that, but it shouldn't materially affect the fiscal note. And with that, I believe I have a panelist, Mr. Ray Leone, and I'd certainly be happy to take questions.
Yep. First up, Mr. Ray Leone.
Good afternoon, Delegate Wilson, Delegate Crosby, and committee members. I'm speaking in support today of HB 1272. I approached Delegate Howard on this issue during our company's recent open enrollment period when we received an announcement that if we hadn't had our COVID vaccination and documented it on our benefits webpage, that we would be subject to a $50 deduction from our paycheck every pay period, which is biweekly for us. Until that requirement got met. That would equate basically to losing about $1,300 a year. I myself have been fully vaccinated and working from home for the last 2 years. And some of the folks who work with me, though, haven't been able to do the vaccination for various reasons. And they work at home as well, so they're not exposed to folks in an office. Not that that makes a whole big difference, but in the long run, they're not able in this environment to find other work. So they have to kind of stick with what they've got, and it's a good paying job. It's hard to compete with that in the retail industry as it is. But effectively, it ends up being a deduction straight from your pay in a time when having pay is hard to equate. That could be groceries for a month for somebody. I would like to thank Delegate Howard for his leadership on this issue, and I hope that this is an effective step in protecting our workers' rights as we go forward in this new age of employment. Thank you for the ability to testify.
Thank you, sir. Seeing no hands and there are no further witnesses, that concludes the hearing for this bill. I still do not see Delegate Young, so we'll go on to Delegate Harrison, House Bill 1000.
Thank you. Good afternoon, colleagues, all members of the Economic Matters Committee. For the record, I'm Andrea Fletcher Harrison, and I'm here today asking for a favorable report on HB 1000, which is the Maryland Earn and Learn Act of 2022. This bill allows a licensing authority to issue a license to an applicant if the applicant completes a federally approved apprenticeship and passes the state level exams. The apprenticeship must meet minimum federal standards and have been approved by one of the following: the U.S. Department of Labor, the Apprenticeship Agency, the Maryland Apprenticeship Agency, or other federally recognized state apprenticeship agencies. Like many of you, I've always placed a great deal of value in work. It pays bills and it keeps the lights on. But work means so much more than that. There's a simple accomplishment in each day's work or seeing the fruits of your labor. When people work to their potential, they're not only more self-sufficient, but they're also happier. That's what this bill aims to do, to make it easier for people to get to their desired career track in order to earn a living and pay their bills. And this is done by making fair, common sense reforms to the apprenticeship to license process in Maryland. Maryland is among a group of states that administers a system of apprenticeships. Some trades already use apprenticeships as a stepping stone to becoming fully licensed professionals, and I have consulted with trades on this legislation. They've carved a path for licensure to by apprenticeship in Maryland, and I want to make sure that more people are afforded the same opportunity in the state so that people can get the jobs that they want. Businesses can help to fill open jobs, and we can keep our economy growing. The Earn to Learn Act of 2022 is simple. A person can get licensed in Maryland as long as they complete a federally approved apprenticeship in a job and pass the state licensing exams. If someone earns a license by way of an apprenticeship path, they will be held to the same standard as their colleagues. They will follow the same rules, pay the same fees, and be governed by the same licensing board. A typical path to a license requires a person to pay for education and training, and this can be expensive. This bill does not eliminate government-approved training for workers. It does not upend the traditional path of licensure. Instead, the bill creates another path for licensed jobs. It allows people to work towards their license through on-the-job training, all while taking home a paycheck. The bill also protects apprenticeships from discrimination, and it prevents apprenticeships from taking exams or paying fees that aren't required by other licensed applicants. So the Maryland Earn and Learn Act of 2022 will strengthen the apprenticeship program in Maryland by opening up apprenticeship opportunities to workers and job creators. And based on this information above, I am asking for a favorable report on HB 1000. And I do have a panelist who is here that will be testifying and can answer more technical questions if there are any. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Delegate Harrison. First up, we have Jeff Guido.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, committee members. Jeff Guido with the Baltimore DC Building Trades. We're full support of the bill. We certainly support the required hours needed working in a certain profession or occupation, required to sit for an exam. I think for the plumbing exam, it's like 7,200 hours under the direction of a master plumber gas fitter before you sit for that exam. Passing that, you become a certified journey person. And then it's another roughly 3,600 hours of work under a master plumber to sit for the master exam. In lieu of recent events, I can say that the need for qualified individuals in these occupations has never been more apparent. When you pass the exam, you work the hours, you go to classroom instruction, you work the hours, and you pass the exam, repeat myself, but it proves you have a working knowledge of the applicable codes. And having that knowledge involves public safety. Systems are installed safely, they're tested properly, and they're inspected. And that's why we're supporting this bill. I'll take any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Haley Holick.
Chair Wilson, Vice Chair Crosby, committee members, thank you for your time. I will respect it. My name is Haley Holick. I'm testifying in support of House Bill 1000 on behalf of Opportunity Solutions Project. We support this bill because it takes time and money to get licensed, and that can be a challenge for a lot of folks, especially those who are lower on the economic ladder. Right now, Maryland has more than 200,000 open jobs, and this bill isn't a magic bullet by any means, but it would keep the door open for licensure by apprenticeship. And that framework has been used by trades before, and this just builds that framework out. It applied to more licensed jobs in Maryland. And I think that because the apprenticeship path has been proven to work in other jobs, this should be applied to more licensed occupations in Maryland. States like Tennessee, Missouri, Idaho, Iowa, and Arkansas have already passed this policy, and Maryland should do the same with House Bill 1000. That's why we support this bill. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. And seeing no questions, and there are no further witnesses, that concludes the hearing on House Bill 1000. I still don't see Delegate Young, and the next bill is Delegate Hornberger. I don't see him as well, so we will go to House Bill 1203, Delegate Chisholm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all the members of the Economic Matters Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Brian Chisholm here to present HB 1203 and ask for a favorable report. I know this bill has been presented to this committee consistently and repeatedly over the last decade, but this year is much different than it has been in years past. Most importantly, this bill will only apply to the private sector businesses. Secondly, it is clearly apparent that we are facing this major shortage of labor and employees, which begs the question why. I think in the last bill, we just heard that we have 200,000 open spots or open positions. And I've spoken to a plethora of business owners across all sorts of industries, and they all face the same challenge of a worker shortage like we've never seen in recent history, from electricians and plumbers to nurses and therapists. I hear it all day long in my committee. So right now is when we must remove as many roadblocks and deterrents from attracting as many much needed qualified workers as possible. And this bill is a big, positive, and productive step towards that goal. This bill is simply about a guaranteed freedom of choice and exempts workers from being forced into a union membership. But this bill is not anti-union. In fact, unions could flourish in a right to work state. This is a union's opportunity to display the value of their membership and could help unions actually grow. This is not about ideologically opposition to unions. It's about increasing the economic freedom of Americans. By becoming a right to work state, we encourage economic growth. A 2019 Forbes study found that the right to work laws increased manufacturing employment by about approximately 30%. Let's be honest about where we are in the world today. We should be doing a lot more manufacturing and building here in the United States of America. We are now at the peril of some foreign countries that hate us. We see what's going on in Russia. We see what's going on in Ukraine. They're choking them. And we, luckily the US Congress, I believe today is going to shut off us importing Russian oil. But this is not about oil. This is just about manufacturing and keeping economic growth here in the United States. The same study found right to work law increased self-reported current life satisfaction, expected future life satisfaction, and sentiments about current and future economic activity among workers. 80% of all Marylanders opposed forced unionism. Half of all companies in the United States that are seeking to relocate or expand automatically rule out forced unionized states. This bill would encourage more private businesses to locate in Maryland, spurring greater economic growth, keeping Maryland competitive in a global community. All Maryland companies and the workers can benefit from a better economy. This bill seeks to empower the employee, the employer, and the overall economy. And for those reasons, I request a favorable report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Patricia Baldwin.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me. Sorry, I've just lost my testimony that I had. My name is Tricia Baldwin. I am a member of the Associated Builders and Contractors Maryland Legislative Committee that includes representatives from the 3 Maryland chapters, Cumberland, Chesapeake, and Baltimore, and also includes the Metro Washington. We support, and I am representing the 1,500 businesses that are members of those chapters. We support House Bill 1203 100%. We believe that it is the right of our employees to choose or not to choose to join a union, and we do not believe that either choice should be a condition of employment. The purpose of right to work laws is to guarantee basic fairness and freedoms for our workers. Right to work laws ensure that our workers have the opportunity to choose whether union representation makes sense for them. And if all or most of the members of a bargaining unit believe union representation is best, then nothing in this right to work law prohibits them from exercising that federally protected right. These laws will allow workers who do not want to participate in a union to opt out of joining the union or paying dues or fees. And as Delegate Chisholm said, this is also makes economic sense for Maryland. So we, the ABC members of Maryland, ask you for a favorable report in order to protect Maryland's economic growth and for the protection of the freedoms of our workers. Thank you.
Thank you, John Kolb.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is John Kalb, and I'm the Vice President of the National Right to Work Committee. I'm here today to speak in favor of House Bill 1203, the Maryland Right to Work Bill. This bill would protect every individual in Maryland from being compelled to pay union dues or fees in order to work or keep a living, finally making Maryland the 28th right to work state. Unfortunately, under current Maryland law, a union boss can impose monopoly bargaining on workers, taking away an individual worker's right to negotiate for him or herself. They then demand the government-enforced authority to extract dues or fees from that unconsenting worker, adding insult to injury, regardless of whether the union membership benefits the worker. That's plain wrong. But when it comes right down to it, it's not just about freedom for those workers forced to pay union dues. It's also about jobs for other Marylanders. Half of all companies considering relocation or expansion automatically rule out states that don't have right to work laws. And from 2010 to 2020, the percentage growth in the number of people employed was 4.3% in Maryland, compared to 11% in right to work states. Meanwhile, residents of right to work states earn nearly $3,000 more in household income after adjusting for cost of living. So right to work's not only morally right, it'll also help your economy. So therefore, I urge everyone on the committee to advance House Bill 1203.
Thank you. We will now go to the unfavorables. First up, Donna Edwards.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm Donna Edwards. I'm president of the Maryland State and DC AFL-CIO. The fact is that federal law already makes it illegal to force a worker to join a union, period. Right to work is clever branding. It's meant to be misleading. Right to work laws do nothing to increase workers' chances of finding a job, being paid more, and it definitely does not create a right to a job. We've testified on this bill for more than a decade. You've got ample evidence. I just want to point out recent things that have happened. Governor Jim Justice, who is an anti-labor governor in West Virginia, he actually explained the state's right to work law and the repeal of prevailing wage did not deliver the jobs and the economic boom that was promised. In his words, quoted, "Well, the bottom line to the whole thing is just really simple. We went out and passed a right to work law. We got rid of prevailing wage. We built fields all over the place thinking that they would come. They just didn't come." So it's very surprising that Governor Justice released this honest statement acknowledging the truth about right to work and its bad policies. Also, very recently, when put directly in front of the voters, people reject the right to work. This happened in Missouri in 2018. When it was put on the ballot, it lost 67% to 33%. In Virginia, they also did a ballot initiative to enshrine right to work in the state constitution, and it lost in all 96 counties. So there is ample evidence that right to work hurts workers, whether union or non-union. It hurts our communities, and it definitely hurts state economies. For all of those reasons, we ask for an unfavorable report on HB 1203. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. Gerald Jackson.
Chairman Crosby, committee members, my name is Gerald Jackson. I'm the Secretary Treasurer of the Maryland State and DC AFL-CIO. I'm also the Assistant Business Manager for Plumbers and Steamfitters Local UA Local 486 and a 42-year union member. I vehemently oppose this bill and ask that this committee looks at the true intent of right to work and consider that the foundation of right to work is steeped in segregation and bigotry. Every year we are tasked with addressing this partisan, divisive, union busting bill. We are all familiar with the despicable historical character known as the father of right to work, Vance Muse. He was an unsavory political operative whose views on segregation and Jim Crowism sparked the movement known as right to work. No matter what you're told about how this bill will enhance the business climate of the state of Maryland, the architect of this right to work movement wasn't concerned about business, but perpetuating the ugliest era in American history, the segregation of Americans based on skin color. I'm going to read a quote from one of our great presidents. Those who would destroy or further limit the rights of organized labor, those who would cripple collective bargaining or prevent organization of the unorganized, do a disservice to the cause of democracy. 50 years or so ago, the American labor movement was little more than a group of dreamers. Look at it now. From coast to coast in factories, stores, warehouses, businesses, establishments of all kinds, industrial democracy is at work. Employees represented by free and democratic trade unions of their own choosing participate actively in determining their wages, hours, working conditions. Their living standards are the highest in the world. Their job rights are protected by collective bargaining agreements. They have fringe benefits that were unheard of less than a generation ago. Our labor unions are not narrow, self-seeking groups. They have raised wages, shortened hours, and provided supplemental benefits through collective bargaining and grievance procedures. They have brought justice and democracy to the shop floor. Our unions have fought for aid to education, for better housing, for development of our national resources, and for saving the family-sized farms. They have spoken not for narrow self-interest, but for public interest and for people. For these reasons, I strongly oppose House Bill 1203 and ask for an unfavorable opinion by this committee.
Thank you, sir. Seeing no further witnesses or questions, that concludes the hearing on House. Okay. All right, Delegate Howard.
Yes, thanks. Very quickly, we heard testimony that if Maryland were to pass this bill, we would be the 28th state of the 27 states that preceded us in this legislation. When did they become right to work? Anybody?
I'm probably pretty well positioned to handle that. Sometime between
Sir, Mr.
Sorry.
Carl, can you just do me a favor real quick before you answer? Just throw your camera on.
Of course, sir. John Calb, National Right to Work Committee.
No, I need your name, sir. I need your camera.
Oh, camera. I'm sorry. Sorry. To answer your question, they were passed between 1940s, became right to work states between 1947 and 2017.
Okay, so we have states becoming right to work as late as 2017.
Correct.
Okay, and so are there any states out of the 27 states, because this has been testified as to so damaging and so hard, creating such a hardship, are any of those states attempting to recall or remove their right to work status?
We haven't seen a right to work a right to work repeal bill, rather, pass a state legislative, a house of a state legislature, in the time I've been working at the National Right to Work Committee.
We also heard testimony that it's due to the unions that our lifestyles are better. And is that due to union involvement, or is it due to just the strength of capitalism?
So I would contest the claim that forced unionism makes lifestyles better. I mean, I think there are a lot of things that dictate sort of the economic performance of states, but I think if you look over the years, the jobs have been flowing into the right to work states.
Thank you.
Of course.
Delegate Pippy.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So I'm trying to understand a couple of things. One, what I heard from the bill sponsor was that this was a bill that didn't prohibit someone from joining a union. Rather, it prohibited, an organization from forcing someone to join a union. And then the second thing I heard was that the bill was unnecessary because it was already federal law. And I think it was Mrs. Edwards said that. And then I heard another sponsor saying that, the right to work is, basically a horrific. I'm reading his testimony here, written his testimony, that it's steeped in segregation and bigotry. So I guess, is the federal law that's current law, according to Ms. Edwards, is that a federal law based on segregation and bigotry? I mean, are you guys repealing that law, working to repeal that law? I mean, maybe Mrs. Edwards can chime in on the federal law and why this is I'm just trying to put it all together. So if it's already federal law and it's unnecessary, do we have a federal law in the books that's steeped in bigotry and segregation that we need to work to get rid of? Or, is that just rhetoric that I'm hearing?
No, I can't speak to the 10,000 or more laws that we have and what they are from, but I can say that the fact that the law says that it is illegal to force a worker to join a union, that's part of our democracy and something that we support. So there's plenty of fact and I really didn't want to get into the debate of it on the various studies where in all of the right to work states where the incomes are less, there's far more discrimination for women and people of color. There's far more physical injuries on the job. That's all there. And I can provide that information as we have in the past.
So, for the union members in this state, do we have the racial breakdown of the union members in the state? I'm not a union expert, but I do think that people should have the freedom to choose whether they want to be in a union or not. I think that's fair. I heard and I was reading the testimony from Mr.
They do. They have the freedom to choose.
So then what's your opposition with the bill?
The opposition to the bill is that it's fake, that it's really not a right to work. It doesn't guarantee a job. What it is doing, it's being financed by the real expensive, the millionaires and billionaires to basically suppress wages wherever they can, to fight any type of freedom that a worker would have or a voice that a worker has on the job, and to really suppress wages and to suppress actually benefits and to just make it all about whatever's good for business is good for the economy. And we totally believe that what's good for workers or good for businesses is good for the economy. We're all in this together.
Well, I will say, and I won't speak for the sponsor, but to suggest that the intention of the sponsor is fake and that he's in the pockets of millionaires, let him speak to that himself. But
no, I didn't say the sponsor.
I find that a little disingenuous, Miss Edwards. So, but I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Delegate Aaron's.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Ms. Edwards, why isn't everybody unionized if under what you just mentioned that it brings so much to it? Why aren't we all unionized, and why do we have things like the prevailing wage? If unions are so good at this, why are we not all there?
Actually, I'm glad you asked that because it is really on the rise. So many more people are joining unions, and we've had more actions in the last 2 years with people that are not even non-union, that are actually fighting back and out on the street and saying we want to be unionized. And the recent Pew study, over 68% of Americans support unions, but even more importantly, 35-year-olds down to 18-year-olds support unions by 77%. So yeah, I'm really glad you asked that question because people are really wanting to be unionized and have collective power. So it is growing. Thank you.
Can you tell me where you got that information?
Yes, I can send it to you.
I'm not hearing that same thing when I'm looking at people wanting to work. I look at people like even myself back when I was young, I had to fight to try to become a member of a union, and I had to qualify it. I had to be overlooked, and I had to do all those things, but yet I was able to go out and get a job, and I was able to sustain myself. And I'm not hearing that people are jumping up and down to become unionized. That's something that's a little bit foreign to me, unless we see it in government jobs where we're demanding union workers, and that's the only way they can work.
No.
Isn't that so?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
And in government jobs, there is no longer union. You don't have to join the union, but we have to represent everybody under the bargaining for free.
So you would represent, if I were not union, you'd absolutely represent me to go in there and get work with these people on a job, union workers?
If you work for the state, if you work for the state of Maryland or the university, and you're covered under the collective bargaining and you don't pay dues, you still have union representation.
Would I be able to work in those environments?
That's the law.
Would I be able
That's
to work in those environments? Would I be able to work as a non-union member? Would I be able to get those jobs?
Yes. In all the state jobs, yes. That's through DBM.
Jobs that require union labor, I would be able to work in those jobs in the state.
Are we talking state employees now?
No, I'm
Yes,
talking
there's no
state
job,
work.
state employees.
No, I'm not talking state employees. I'm talking me as a union member, electrical union maker, a crane operator. And I just walked on the job. Would I be able to get those jobs if it requires union labor? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Ms. Edwards, quickly, does any right to work state have a higher median income or lower poverty level than Maryland?
I can send you the study. Okay, I don't have, I have the postscripts, if you notice, the footnotes, but I can send you studies that will allow you. Okay.
Okay. Yep, and we will send that out to the committee. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, that concludes the hearing on House Bill 1203. We'll now go to House Bill 1265. I know Delegate Young is here near a fireplace. Delegate Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Pat Young, and I'm happy to introduce HB 1265, Barbers and Cosmetologists, Licensure Requirements, Review and Regulations. So I think this is a pretty simple bill. This bill requires the State Board of Barbers and the State Board of Cosmetologists by December 31st, 2023, review the education training requirements to qualify for a license to practice barbering and a license to practice cosmetology, as well as identify any requirements that are duplicative or excessively onerous on an individual seeking to meet the requirements that are stated, as well as adopt new regulations applying to both. I'll just give you a little background. This came out of a conversation with a constituent at last session, but it was after crossover. During the pandemic, her business was doing well and they were trying to expand. She has her barber's license, but in order to get her master's barber's license, but in order to get her master cosmetology license, she had to go through a certain number of courses, which she had no problem with. And we have no problem with either. Problem was that a lot of the classes she was taking were the same classes that she took when she went to get her master barber's license. So she reached out asking if there was anything that could be done to make it easier for someone that already has their master barber's license, or vice versa, master cosmetology license, to then get the other one, especially in the sense of expanding your business and expanding what service you can provide. I will say, so the committee knows, I've been working with the department. Had a conversation with them this morning. They're not opposed to the bill. This is actually something in conversation they wanted to do before the session started. There had been turnover at the cosmetology board and the barbers board in terms of leadership. So we're going to continue that conversation, but this really does make sure that it identifies this particular need and this particular issue of duplication of services, and asking folks that are trying to get these licenses or expand their education. It makes it easier for them to get them, as well as recognize the fact that there are certain circumstances where there are duplicative classes and services that are being provided that we're going to make sure that we try and get taken out either through statute or through law. So with that, I urge a favorable report and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Delegate. I don't see any hands, and you brought a fantastic witness list, which is 0. So that concludes the hearing on House Bill 1265, and we will go to our final hearing for the day. It's Delegate Hornberger, 1285.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Glad to be back this year with some cleanup language for the landmark legislation that we passed last year, many years in the making, overhauling the way that our electricians are licensed. Now, the difference between this bill and some bills you've heard earlier is this has across the board support, everywhere from electrical unions to county organizations to ABC. This bill does 3 very simple things. And again, they're meant to clean up last year's bill. The first is that it clarifies the apprentice program that we have in the state of Maryland, and that apprentice program qualifies you to be able to get your journeyman license without taking an exam. The second point is that it clarifies a typo from last year that we had somehow put in that you need 3 years of experience. This sets it at 4, which it should be, to move into the journeyman's license. And that is a small window of time that folks are able to grandfather in. After that window is closed, everyone will have to go the traditional 2 paths, the apprentice program, or working on their own, and then taking an exam. And the last part of it, which was a request from the Department of Labor, deals with insurance requirements and just puts electricians in the same posture as other trades groups. Again, lots of support for this bill. It was heard in the Senate, SB 604, and we are waiting on their amendment because they were looking to move on the bill this week. And then once we have that amendment, we will submit to the committee just to put it in the same posture as the Senate. So we'll have lots of folks in favor. And with that, I'll turn it over to any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. First up, Tom Clark.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair in the committee. I'd like to ask for your support of 1285, the Electricians Act, which simplifies and encourages residents of the electrical industry to obtain licenses. The crown jewel is the revision of the waiver of the examination requirement for an applicant who has successfully completed an apprenticeship program. The experience, I noticed as an electrician on the job, whenever we have a code interpretation, we always look for the 4th or 5th year apprentice because they're the brightest ones that know the code. They're most update on the code. So it does a good thing because a lot of time when we talk about licensing, it's all about enforcement. And if Maryland doesn't enforce it and it changes from different labor organizations, Department of Labor, how they enforce it. Well, this way encourages people to get them, and they'll pay a fee for every 2 years for 30 or 40 years of their career. So it works for the state and it works for the electricians. I ask you to support this bill and also commend both sponsors in the House and the Senate for sticking with this for so long. And they've really done well, and I appreciate it. And I ask you to support HB 1285. Thank you.
Thank you. Grant Schmelzer.
Thank you, Chairman Crosby. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Grant Schmelzer. I'm the Executive Director with the Independent Electrical Contractors. We're a trade association based in Laurel, Maryland. We have over 900 apprentices and 200 participating employers in our apprenticeship program that employ over 10,000 electrical workers across the region. Like my colleague Tom Clark said, we are in favor of these of this bill, and we wish that the committee would view this as favorable. Not many times, as Chairman Pinsky said in our Senate hearing, where you have the union and non-union organizations in favor of it. So that should tell all of our delegates where this stands. The thing that I'm going to stress to you is a sense of urgency on this. Based upon the bill that was passed last year, we need to get these cleanup changes through because time is ticking and that window is closing. So as Delegate Hornberger said, we're waiting on the amendments from Senator McCray and Chairman Pinsky to kind of work out and get those through. But this will really create a level playing field. It will help electrical contractors on the Eastern Shore as well as Western Maryland. So when there's reciprocity issues, this can be addressed through the Maryland Department of Labor. And hopefully this is the last time you will see me on this particular bill because we'll have it signed, sealed, and delivered. Thank you, Chairman Crosby.
Thank you. And I don't see any hands. That concludes the hearing for House Bill 1285 and the hearing or the bill hearings for today. Members that are part of the Public Utility Subcommittee, just a reminder that starts at 3:30. Delegate Mounts. Yeah,
sorry, I was having technical difficulties. I had a quick question for the for Delegate Hornberger.
Sure.
Did Mueller testify today?
Mueller has submitted a letter of support, so it'll be in your written testimony.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Thanks so much, and appreciate your hard work on the bill too, Delegate Mounts.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, well, that officially concludes the bill hearings for today. Members, if you're part of Public Utilities, that starts at 3:30. Everybody else have a great afternoon. Take care. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.